unfortunately, Kosovo has been bumping from one crisis to another, particularly concerning relations between the ethnic Serbs and the ethnic Albanians. And certainly 700 extra soldiers will allow that greater security blanket to be installed, and it will also help the KFOR soldiers to do a better job of protecting themselves. Well, a couple of weeks ago, the Kosovo government in Pristina decided to organise local elections in the north, which is the region predominantly inhabited by ethnic Serbs. There are about 80,000 of them who have still remained since the conflict in 1999. But the Serbs boycotted those elections en masse because they were unhappy with the fact that the Kosovo government in Pristina has still not moved ahead to set up a so-called Association of Serb Municipalities, which would give them a high degree of autonomy. So as a result, only 3.5% of the population of the population in the north actually went to the polls, predominantly, of course, the Albanians. So what has happened now is that Pristina has decided to go ahead and appoint 4 Albanian mayors, saying that it's the fault of the Serbs for not having voted. But, of course, the Serbs feel that to be governed by Albanian mayors would be unacceptable, and that's the reason why they've decided to organise all of these protests.
And then NATO's decided to send 700 more troops in. Do you think, well, what do you think will be the outcome of that? Will that calm things?
Well, certainly you're going to have a much greater security presence in the north because you're dealing with quite widespread demonstrations. And as you saw in recent days, they've turned violent. About 40 NATO KFOR, that's the Kosovo force, as it's called there, soldiers have been injured, some fairly seriously, and had to be sent back home to Hungary for medical treatment. So it's a very tense situation. So you need a greater security presence. But the most important thing is to calm the situation down because, as you implied in your first question, unfortunately, Kosovo has been bumping from one crisis to another, particularly concerning relations between the ethnic Serbs and the ethnic Albanians. And certainly 700 extra soldiers will allow that greater security blanket to be installed, and it will also help the KFOR soldiers to do a better job of protecting themselves.
That will possibly, fix the current situation. But I mean, as you just said, this feels like something that can happen quite suddenly and constantly. What is the long-term solution here? Is there a long-term solution?
Well, the solution is definitely long-term, as you imply, and I think, yes, there is one, but both Belgrade, that's Serbia, of course, which has been encouraging often the Serb minority in Kosovo to sort of boycott elections, to protest, not to cooperate with the Kosovo government in Pristina, has to stop interfering and encourage the Serbs instead to go back to, for example, the police force and the public administration. Many Serbs left the police force and the public administration earlier this year when there was another protest over the imposition of Kosovo license plates in the north, which the Serbs who still travel around with Serb number plates weren't very happy about. So Belgrade, of course, has to call for restraint and not to see this as another sort of opportunity to stoke up tensions and to put pressure on Kosovo. But at the same time, the Kosovars themselves in Pristina also need to stop taking unilateral actions which upset the Serbs, which simply escalate the situation unnecessarily, like forcibly imposing these 4 mayors in the north when it's obvious that Serbs in that area want to be governed, of course, by elected Serb representatives. So clearly both sides have to sort of stop going for their sort of ultimate sort of unilateral agendas, if you like. The EU has been sponsoring talks between the two sides, which have had some success, at least in drawing up a framework agreement to normalise relations. So first calm the situation, then go back to the EU process, but it will take some time. But the way forward is clearly to give the Serbs in the north some degree of self-administration, but without leading it to the kind of paralysis that you see with, for example, an entity like the Republika Srpska in Bosnia, where that entity has been blocking the country as a whole from moving closer towards the EU and NATO.
What did you make of Novak Djokovic writing on a camera at the French Open, "Kosovo is the heart of Serbia, stop the violence"? Is that helpful?
Yeah, well, stop the violence is certainly something that I think we all agree. But Kosovo is an independent country. It's been recognised by 2/3 of the membership of the United Nations. Of course, that's not all, but by most of the Western NATO and EU countries. It's not going to go back to Serbia. That's clear after everything that happened in the past, particularly the war in 1999. So we need to sort of move forward on the basis of what I suppose in the Middle East you might call the two-state solution. That there is Serbia, there is Kosovo. They need to sort of stop reviving old historical wounds, bury that particular hatchet, move on. And there the process for both of them of EU accession is going to be absolutely critical.